Project 3. Fixing wobbly bone staff. My previous project was to construct a LARP safe bone staff. That went very well. It looks great, in my humble opinion. Unfortunately, the staff was starting to get quite top heavy, causing the neck beneath the skull to flex. So after some deliberation, it was decided that I would go back and modify it. Doing this by, in effect, inserting a fiberglass rod. To do this, I first had to get access to the core. I stripped some of the latex off the foam, and here I am now cutting away some of the foam to get to the core. I'm using a soldering iron to melt the hot glue around the core. This helps me more easily remove the foam. Whenever you make something, especially for the first time, you're more than likely going to screw up. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to get it wrong. This is why when I started this channel, I wanted to make sure I kept in my mistakes, to emphasize that making things is a process. You start off doing it wrong and you keep going until it's right. The bone staff looks great. Everyone who's seen it says it looks amazing. Unfortunately, it was unsafe. I could either start again or modify it. In this case, having never modified a LARP weapon before, I wanted to see if it was possible. We're going to find out together if it is. As you can see, this is the base of the curved core. And then I'll be removing the foam and latex around the top of the curved core where I want the reinforcement to go. Once again, using the soldering iron to melt the hot glue. Next, I cut a piece of fiberglass to the right length using my multi-tool and placing it against the original to identify what needs cutting. In an attempt to reduce the amount of fiberglass that's thrown into the air, I like to give it a spray of water in the area. I use a flexible extension cord on my multi-tool. This allows me to spray water as liberally as I want without the risk of electrocuting myself. I use a rasp around the core just to roughen up the area so the resin has a little something more to adhere to. And here I am wrapping some fishing wire around the core just to better reinforce it. Next, I mix up some 2-part resin and lay it on liberally. I wrap it with some fiberglass ribbon to further reinforce the joint and make it as strong as possible. and secure the ribbon with some string. Once it's dry, I remove the masking and drill away some of the resin. Because the latex already on this piece has been sealed with Isoflex, it'll be harder to get glue and latex to stick to it. So what I do is give the edges of the latex a quick sand just to remove the top surface to make it easier to stick further layers onto the latex. Next, I am covering all of the new fiberglass with foam, similar to how I did in the previous project, just covering both sides with contact adhesive and wrapping it around. Just covering every bit of fiberglass I see, and then building up bits of foam here and there. Because in effect this is going to be an extra bit of bone. The intention is for our newly added brace to be an extra bone going from just above the hand grip to just beneath the skull. As you can see, because the skull rested so low and close to the area I was working, I had to wrap some tape and string around the skull to pull it out of the way. Here I am now that I've built up the extra foam, just shaping it and melding, shaping it to look like two bits of bone butted together. You can see a little bit better here of how I moved the bottom of the skull away from where I was working. And quickly shaping the area just to look like a bone joint. And making sure to I'm cutting out the backs of the spinal column and attaching them on. Next is the leather strap work that's going to cover most of the joints that I've just carved. I found covering the leather strap work with top tip. If you ever want to cover both sides of a small thin piece of foam with contact adhesive, do what I did here. take a block of foam and cut out a dish in the foam, and then if you cut that dish almost in half, going all the way down, if you fill that dish in with contact glue and run the foam through, as I'm doing here, you'll be able to coat both sides of the foam much easier with the contact glue. Unraveling straps covered in contact glue is an entirely fun and easy process, and always makes crafting projects infinitely more entertaining. I made sure to cover over the latex with the leather strapping. This way I could ensure that the seams between the old work and the new work were harder to see. Now it's time to cover the old work with plastic to ensure that tidying it up is a lot easier process. This is just a quicker and easier form of masking, effectively, to hide the parts that you don't want covered in this case, latex and paint and glue. Around the edges, I do the more detailed work with low tack tape to make sure that the latex doesn't cover the entire piece. Masking can be a very long and tedious process. But in this case, it's not too difficult. I normally forget this part, but once you're happy with the foam, it's always good to give it a quick bash from a hot air gun. This will slightly melt the surface, giving you a good even surface, and it'll smooth out any of the burrs you've produced from sanding the foam. Then you want to cover it with diluted glue to ensure the latex sticks better. Next comes our layers of latex that we put on with a foam brush. You want to do two layers of that, allowing each layer to dry. Next is your dump coats, allowing them to dry in between. 3 or 4 layers. In total of the dump coat, making sure to remove all dribbles and getting rid of air bubbles. Just in this case, I made sure to cover only the areas I wanted, keeping away from the masked area. Obviously, I didn't need to be perfect, but it's a waste if you cover it too liberally. First, a dark coat of brown sprayed on, then a lighter coat of brown sprayed on. Then we mask all of the areas that we want to keep brown, which in this case is all the leather straps. We're going to show bonework peeking through. Here and there. And obviously the tiny little skull that I added. I like that tiny little skull. No one seems to notice it, but I managed to save it when I removed it previously. You'll find some of the tiny details that you add that you like on your project. No one will ever notice. It's not irritating at all. Masking is so important. You've got to get it perfectly right or else it'll all go wrong. It's true, but it doesn't stop it being dull. Next, this is the slightly off yellow from last time. Fortunately, I still had it from the last job. And then we dry brush in white. Dry brushing is effectively, to dry brush you remove most of the paint from the brush, so you only get highlight. I then highlight in a slightly off-white or more bone colour. It's difficult to see because they're just so very similar. Next comes the airbrushing stage. With thinned acrylic paint, I first add black into the crevices to bring out the details, the raised and lowered areas, to add shadow and give the whole piece some depth. Then I go over in a brighter brown just to emphasize the leather strap work. And finally, Isoflex. This is the final varnish. And that's it. The flex has been taken out with the reinforcement, and you'd have to look very closely to see the seams. There are small differences, but yeah, that'll do.